I eagerly awaited the first day of the deer hunting season, just like I used to wait for Christmas as a child. It always falls on the first Monday after Thanksgiving in Pennsylvania, and is somewhat like a state holiday. Many schools close because a large number of students from younger grades, as well as many teachers, will be in the Pennsylvania woods on Monday, not in the classroom. At the last minute, a client from California insisted that I be available on Monday to check his account. I tried to talk him out of it, and even carefully inquired about his meeting with another representative of the company. The account was so important to the company that, in turn, it made it very important to me as well. The first time since I turned 12, I spent the first day of deer season at work. I accepted the fact that I would only be able to leave for our hunting camp on Monday evening, thus missing all the fun that we, hunters, had enjoyed during the day before the hunt. This meant that I would be missing out on beer and the money. I lost in poker. If I'm lucky, I might be able to make up for most of the lost time, beer, and money on Monday evening. With this goal in mind, I packed my hunting gear into the pickup truck, threw a case of beer on the back seat, and headed out for a 3-hour drive to our hunting camp near Bradford. My wife Barb left me a note telling me she was going out with a couple of her friends and wished me good luck on the hunt. I wasn't fooled. I knew that most women were more than happy to see us, the guys, away from home during the first week of the deer season. For them, it was a small getaway. I was an hour's drive from home when dusk turned to darkness. As I was following the twists and turns of Route 6, I saw a service vehicle ahead of me smash into a beautiful buck and toss it to the shoulder. Slowing down, I saw another deer, a doe, fly off the vehicle and fall next to the buck. I pulled over to the shoulder and, using the headlights, looked at the unfortunate animals. The buck had impressive antlers, nearly 2 feet wide. The doe's antlers were much smaller. Both were dead, like last year's dandelions. I made my decision right then and there. I took some beer from my hunting jacket, filled the cans, and hung them on the bucks. Then I loaded them into my truck, turned around, and headed home. I needed to get them somewhere I could dress them before their bodies got too cold. The longer I waited, the harder and more damaging the process would be. I stopped near an old friend's barn about 2 miles from home and turned on the exterior light. Then, using the field spotlight, I illuminated both deer. While working on the buck, I admired his antlers. He was the most beautiful buck I had ever seen. It occurred to me that I had a wonderful opportunity to win a large pool for shooting deer in my hunting club. I considered the moral question that might arise from the fact that this was actually the result of a traffic accident, not a hunt. I quickly dismissed any doubts that had crept into my mind. The rule is, the biggest antlers belong to the legally marked buck. I qualified. Besides, I had never been closer to winning a hunting competition before. This was my time. I decided to go home to clean myself up and change clothes. No matter how many times I had dressed deer, I couldn't do it without getting blood on my shirt and jeans. I threw the dressed animals into the truck and headed home. My beer cans were filled, and suddenly I had no reason to rush to the camp. By the time I got there, it would already be too late to drink beer or play cards. At the very least, I had properly attached my beer cans to the animals, I thought, turning onto the dirt road leading to my house. I had already seen one of my friends get heavily fined for having a beer can fall off his deer. The local district judge had refused to acknowledge that the deer was properly marked, and that it was the court's intervention that caused the beer can to fall off the animal. The judge's name was Ray Parker, and he was proud of being known in our town as the hanging judge. He only dealt with small legal cases and lawsuits involving sums of less than $10,000, but he was a pompous ass. Barb was on friendly terms with this fool's sister. Nevertheless, I knew it wouldn't do me any good. If I ended up in front of this idiot in court, facing charges for illegal hunting or violating traffic laws. It was already past 11 when I pressed the remote to open the door of my garage. The house was completely dark, so I assumed that Barb was already in bed and probably asleep. I was surprised to see that I couldn't drive into my garage. In my spot was a brand new Lincoln. Barb's Jeep was parked in its usual spot, Walking around the Lincoln, I touched the hood, and it was cold. The car must have been there for some time. The keys were still in the ignition. I quietly entered my house. I stopped and listened. The house was dark and very quiet. Feeling a bit nervous, I climbed the stairs that led to the bedroom. Approaching the master bedroom, I heard loud snoring. I had slept with Barb for 25 years and she had never snored. I felt a tightening inside. I walked through the open bedroom door. There was enough dim light to make out 2 human figures on my bed. Then I was struck by how much of a fool I was sneaking around my own damn house. I reached out, turned on the light, and waited for what would come next. Hell would break loose, but nobody even flinched. Barb was lying naked, her hand placed on the man's chest. The man had a round beer belly and a lot of hair on his stomach and chest. I leaned over and pulled the pillow off his face. It was that damn judge-hanging man. Ray Parker was sleeping in my bed with his soft little hand on my wife. It's amusing how in moments like these a person's mind works. I discovered that I was most outraged by the fact that my wife had invited such a pathetic jerk into our bed. Damn. We both knew plenty of guys who, from time to time, could have had her, and that would have been preferable. Then I saw empty wine, bottles on the nightstand. Surprisingly, the light turning on in the bedroom didn't bother them at all. They must have gotten drunk and were having sex until exhaustion. I bent down to grab the hunting rifle. The next time that bastard wakes up, he'll be dead. While rummaging through the toolbox looking for screws and cartridges, I started thinking about my situation. A man is always the main suspect. Damn, even if someone else shot this jerk, they'd probably still convict me for the murder just because I had such a strong motive. I needed to be smarter. Then I noticed the tracks scratching over the edge of my truck bed. I was damn sure I didn't want to end up in prison before I showed the other guys my deer and won the competition. Parker wasn't worth missing out on this one pleasure in life. Anyway, recently, Barb and I hadn't been getting along too well. Why let this creature ruin my life? I quickly came up with Plan B and began putting it into action. I took my hunting rifle from the deer's rack, which was in my truck, and carefully placed it in the large trunk of the Lincoln. Then I pulled out the old double-barrel shotgun, 12 gauge, which I had bought from an old drunk just a few weeks before his death, nearly 20 years ago. I never told anyone I had it. It was extremely deadly and illegal weaponry. I wiped it down with an old cloth to avoid leaving fingerprints, then placed it in the trunk next to the deer. I even found a relatively new pillow and threw it in the trunk, carefully tearing apart. The damn rifle that warned about disposing of this cursed weapon, it was a federal crime. Then I went into the house and filled the kettle with very hot water from the tap. I filled a kitchen syringe and returned to the deer in the Lincoln's trunk. I poured a little hot water into the hollow cavity and waited about a minute. Then I used the syringe to draw out a substantial amount of bloody water from the animal and poured it into a bucket. Afterward, I refilled the syringe from the deer's body and parked my truck around the corner of the house. I took my son's hockey mask, put it on, and returned to my rather noisy bedroom. When Barb was drinking, it was almost impossible to wake her up. My plan would have worked better if she had stayed asleep, but I was ready to flap my wings if necessary. I took Parker's clothes off the chair in the bedroom and hid them in the closet. I noticed that his cell phone was still hanging from his belt. Then I placed the bowl and syringe on the nightstand. I climbed onto the bed, positioning my knees on either side of Barb. Once I reached this position, I gently nudged Parker, but he kept snoring. I pulled the deer's heart out of the bag where I had placed it when I dressed it. Sometimes the guys at camp like to marinate them with beer and crackers. I've never had a taste for that particular organ. I opened the leather latch holding my hunting knife and exposed the blade. Then I poured the blood from the bowl onto the sheets in Barb's chest. It's surprising how little blood is needed for everything to look like a crime scene. Barb reached out and lightly rubbed her left breast while the liquid quickly dried. Then she lowered her hand again. I emptied the bowl, placed it back on the high table, and took the syringe from the table. I held it above Parker's face and lowered it about 4 inches above his snoring mouth. Holding the heart in one hand, I squeezed it very tightly and sprayed the bloody water onto Parker, some of which went into his mouth and made him choke. I quickly set the syringe down, grabbed the knife, and began running the blade over the heart in my left hand. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched Parker and giggled like the Wicked Witch of the West. He hissed and suddenly sat up straight. He looked at the heart in my hand, then at Barb's bloody chest, coughed, and spat out the blood he had swallowed. He gasped for air. Then I turned my masked face to look at him. That was enough. He jumped out of bed and raced down the hallway like a rocket, and I only had to make it to the garage when he, completely naked, opened the door to his car. "You're next, lover boy," I shouted as he slammed the door and sped out of the garage. I went back, upstairs, and put Parker's clothes back on the chair. I took his phone and shoved it into my pocket. I found the time to take Barb's phone out of its case notebook and shoved that into my pocket too. Then I took the bowl and syringe and placed them in the sink with the rest of the dirty dishes. I turned on the dishwasher and went to my truck, turning off all the lights and closing the garage door. I was only a few miles down the road when I noticed the big Lincoln parked on the side. It occurred to me that there must be some truth to the old theory that a couple of pounds of sugar in a car's gas tank could lead to catastrophic consequences. Half a mile from the car, I noticed what was clearly a naked man running down the highway. As I got closer, he turned and ran toward the shore, disappearing from view. What kind of sick, crazy bastard would run around naked at the end of November in northern Pennsylvania? I clearly saw my duty. I took Parker's cell phone, dialed Coffin, and reported the alarming sight I had just witnessed. But I forgot to leave them my name. They would have to rely on the caller ID to figure out who made the call. Less than an hour later, I passed the spot where I had seen the two dead deer. I took Parker's cell phone and dialed my home number. The call went to voicemail the first time I called. I hung up and dialed my number again. This time, Barb picked up after the fourth ring. "Hello, is something wrong?" Barb asked with that usual concern people have when they get a call in the early hours. "Turn on the light and see what's left of your lover." I hissed into the phone. I waited about 10 seconds, then heard a primal growl. Barb must have seen the blood and found someone's heart next to her in bed. At least that was the only thing that could have upset her so much. "You crazy bastard," Barb screamed into the phone. "You killed Ray. You'll never get away with this. I'm calling the police." The Ray. Phone went silent in my ear. A smile flashed across my face as I thought about the story Barb was telling the police at that very moment. I arrived at the hunting camp around 4 in the morning. I hung my deer on the pole we had for that purpose. I noticed a couple of smaller deer were already hanging there, and I smirked to myself as I entered the cabin. When I walked in, old Dan McGraw was already making breakfast. He had been chosen to cook for the group. Afterward, he could go hunting until the next lunch. He set a plate with bacon, eggs, and potato pancakes in front of me, and I started eating. Tom Burton climbed out of bed and went outside to check the weather. He was gone for about a minute, then burst back through the door. "Where the hell did you get that deer, Dave?" he demanded. "It's the biggest one I've ever seen." This question prompted a mass migration through the front door. Few things give a hunter more hope than seeing a beautiful deer caught by someone else. It revives their hope and stirs their imagination. I explained how, the evening before, I had visited a friend. I ventured into the thickest brush and mountain laurel I could find and stumbled upon a big buck. Then, when it sprinted at full speed through the thick brush, I chased it and took one shot. The rest was history. While the other guys were putting on their warm clothes and donning insulated boots, I stripped down, climbed into my bunk between the sheets, and fell into a deep sleep. A few hours later, something woke me up. I opened one eye. In front of me was a head wearing a police cap. "Mr. Reed, I really don't want to interrupt your hunt, but I have a few questions for you," he said calmly, not even trying to hide his sarcasm. I stared at him for a few seconds, then sat up and scratched all the places a person should scratch when they first wake up. Then I put on my pants and shirt and headed for the coffee pot. "That's a fine deer with your tag," he started. "Where and when did you get it?" "At a friend's property." "The time is on the tag," I replied slowly. "Our state police currently working with The hunting license commission? Let's get to the point, Mr. Reed. This morning, your wife called the Springville police. She claimed that you killed her lover, who turned out to be District Judge Ray Parker. She said you cut out his heart and left it next to her in your bed. And to make matters worse, Parker's car was found abandoned about a mile from your house. A search of the vehicle found a dead deer and a sawed-off shotgun in the trunk. There was also a pillow with the federal tag removed. The cop added thoughtfully, "The body of Ray Parker has not been found yet. It's only a matter of time, Mr. Reed. Why not make it easier and just tell us where you put Parker's body?" the officer insisted. "Wow. You guys are good," I smirked. "You skipped all the nonsense about forensic investigation and just want to get some dumb asshole to confess to a murder when you don't have a body, motive, or weapon." The officer picked up my hunting knife, which was in a plastic bag, and waved it in front of me, saying, "Jealousy is the oldest motive. Not many men are very happy when they find out their wife is an adulteress. All we need is Parker's body, and we'll have everything we need to send you to prison for a long time." I'm more than a little disappointed by how the various law enforcement agencies are handling this situation. I smirked at the surprised cop. "You're making an incorrect assumption, then trying to prove that it actually happened. Then you try to get a confession for something that didn't happen, instead of figuring out what actually happened and following the clues to wherever they lead. The last time I saw Ray Parker, he was running through the forest naked. I don't know why. Perhaps my ritual of thanking the hunting gods for blessing me with a magnificent trophy buck caused him a slight sense of nausea. That, along with the fact that he saw me in the same room where he had slept with my adulterous wife, might have triggered some irrational fear brought on by guilt, which in turn caused him to run out of the room naked, I suggested. If Parker is still alive, then why was there a heart in your bed? As I've already said, I have a ritual that I go through when I'm blessed with the opportunity to take a big buck. I kneel in my bed and raise the deer's heart as a sign of gratitude. Then I place the heart back in its place in my bed as a sign of gratitude and respect for the hunting gods. I added, with all the respect I could muster. At that moment, the officer's radio went off. He went outside and spoke in a muffled voice for several minutes. Then he returned to the house. Ray Parker was found half an hour ago, wandering naked through the forest. 2 hunters found him and pointed him in the direction of the road. I think once they realized who he was, they refused to give him any clothes or just take him out of the forest. They told him they came to hunt, not to collect trash. The cop smirked. I thanked the officer when he handed me my knife. He asked me to come to the local police station and give a statement. I promised him I would do that once I finished my week of hunting. Then I climbed back into my bunk. On Friday afternoon, I went to the police station. They were a bit angry that I had waited so long to make my statement, but that wasn't my problem. It seems Ray Parker accused me of making him believe I had cut out Barb's heart. He also claimed that I planted a deer and a gun in his trunk and even messed up his Lincoln. I have the right to practice worship of the hunting gods in my own home, I told the officer who was questioning me. If he doesn't like my rituals, he should really stay away from my marital bed. Then he won't come into contact with them. As for the deer and the illegal weapon, I was sitting in the courtroom and heard him tell people when they caught him red-handed that anyone would lie to avoid responsibility for their actions. It was time for this stupid bastard to come to the plate and take his medicine like a man. I don't know anything about the deer, the gun, or his damn wrecked car. He has hundreds of enemies. Didn't the cop tell me that he also had a pillow with the tag removed? That's a federal crime, check it out. On Friday night, I was sleeping at home in my bed. I felt the bed shift and woke up to find Barb sitting on the edge of the bed next to me. She hadn't been there when I went to sleep. I guess you know I called our kids and told them to lock the doors. I told them you went crazy and killed my lover, and that they should call the police if you show up at their door, Barb started. I've heard something about that. Now that you mention it, I quietly admit it. Maybe you've even heard the rumors that I called the police and told them you cut out Ray's heart and left it lying in our bed, Barb continued, as I nodded in agreement. Suppose you've heard that Ray's been charged with violating firearms laws, and he was fined for transporting an illegal deer and for hunting without a license, Barb continued. The assistant district attorney even tried to charge him for removing the tag from the pillow, but I think that's legal after all. The pillow was already sold. No kidding, I replied in surprise. You can take those tags off once you've paid for the pillow. I guess the same goes for mattresses too. I never knew that. It seems obvious, Dave. It was a new pillow, and now it's covered in blood and some kind of filth, along with all the other bedding and pillows that were on that bed. You didn't have to go to such extremes. Ray already had enough trouble with other cases he was being accused in. Knowing you, I'm just surprised they didn't find illegal substances or prescription pills in his trunk. I have no idea what you're talking about, Barb. That Parker guy, he's a tough one. I never would have guessed he was into illegal stuff. I mean, I never even suspected he was sleeping with my adulterous wife. So how would I know what kind of man he really is? I replied. You won't be happy for long with that adulteress lying next. Do you, Dave? Barb complained. She's been married a couple of times and couldn't keep her legs together. She'll do it again for someone else the first time you turn your back. Well, Barb, I've come to the conclusion that that's true for a whole lot of women. The difference is I don't expect anything special from Doris. She's an adulteress, but she's amazing in bed. Just look at that chest, I exclaimed, pulling back. The sheet covering the sleeping woman. A long time ago I told you, if I ever caught you cheating, I'd be in bed with your cousin before you could blink. You were warned, so don't whine. It doesn't suit you, Barb. You really set me up, Dave, Barb admitted. Ray Parker was the only man I ever cheated on you with. And only a couple of times. By the time you get tired of Doris, we'll be even, right? Dave? Until then, I'll sleep in the guest room. I stayed with Susan, but she, my only daughter, made it clear she thinks I'm a terrible adulteress. I shouldn't have called our kids and told them to lock their doors against you. They never would have known about my stupidity with Ray, Barb said thoughtfully. You would never have told them, would you, Dave? You always had that rule. Never speak badly of me in front of the kids. You made me do it myself. I lost the respect of my husband and children over some pompous idiot. What are you going to do now, Dave? Wait for you to leave the room. Then wake up your adulterous cousin and have sex with her, I replied with a smirk. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like. It helps new stories come to light.